The Montreal Canadiens enter the Four Nations break on a bit of a tailspin, but what can they do to right the ship, and how will they approach the trade deadline? Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens joins us next to discuss that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Montreal Canadiens, Laura Saba. And Laura, the Habs not exactly hitting on all cylinders as we enter the break. It's been a roller coaster ride all season. They win 4 in a row, they lose 3 in a row. Why has this team been slumping lately?
So, we want to joke around and say that it's been downhill since Emil Heineman got hit by a car in Salt Lake City. But there are a lot of things that are going wrong. I think one of the big things is that teams figured them out. And specifically what happened when they first started on that surge was they got a lot of confidence from Patrick Laine being on the power play. He scored, I think it was 8 of his first goals in on the power play as a Montreal Canadien. If I'm not mistaken, I'm sure our listeners will keep me honest. But people figured it out, right? It was, that was predictable. So that was one thing. They also, I think they're a young team. So that 60-minute effort, we aren't seeing it as often as we would like. I think defensively, they aren't doing that great. They aren't doing as badly as they were in the beginning of the season. Maybe after the first month, I would have said it was the defense that was a problem. But right now what's happening is that they had 4 lines that were going well. The second line was sort of, it was on the verge of getting going, but the other lines were definitely working and clicking. And right now, you're not seeing that. You're seeing, and part of it has to be like the Canadiens have to do some line shuffling due to the absence of Emil Heineman. But part of it too is that the first line isn't getting anything going. The second line has been terrible some nights, so Marty has had to do a lot of line blending. But the things that were clicking before aren't. And it sort of is also a situation where everything that can go wrong at the wrong time is happening. Whereas before, during that surge, everything that could go right at the right time was happening, right? They were getting the bounces, they were playing well. And the last 2 games that were against New Jersey and Tampa at the Bell Center, the Canadiens actually played really well. They couldn't get offense going against New Jersey. But if you look at the underlying numbers, it was really good. And you saw them come out with effort, right? The effort is always there. And then against Tampa, the underlying numbers, Montreal was extremely dominant versus Tampa. They just, a couple of mistakes or, a goal that shouldn't have gone in or, that kind of thing. So the last 2 games, I would say, I'm not as upset about as I would be for the previous 8 or 9. The thing is, though, I think it's a little bit too late. I don't think you can say that the Canadiens are going to be in the mix anymore when we come back from the Four Nations break.
So playoffs or no playoffs, how do you get this team back on track, back to where they want to be for the rest of this season?
So, one thing that I said on our show and on a different podcast is that they have time to reset, right? And the things that aren't working are sometimes fundamentals. Like that the power play is terrible. Like it's not generating anything. It's not the worst in the league by any means. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that the problems that plague it are that it's not creative and it's not dynamic, right? So they need to work on that. They keep talking about how they don't have time to practice it. Well, when they come back, there's going to be a few practices before they start playing against Ottawa on their return. So they have to do that. And then there's some fundamentals, right? A lot of people are playing through stuff. Josh Anderson, notably, has taken a therapy day for every practice, but he's still playing really well by Josh Anderson's standards. They need to get it together. Some rest is going to be in order. We're trying to figure out now what happens with the Caden Gooley hole in the lineup. Logan Mailloux was brought up. They don't offer the same things. So Logan Mailloux is now currently back down in Laval to help them with their playoff push. But I think the biggest thing that they have to do is they have to get back to basics. They have to, their passing is terrible. Their positional awareness is terrible. And all of those things were good during that 1.5 to 2 months where the Canadiens were surging. Like, that they can do it. We've seen it happen. We've seen it be successful. It's just that they seem to have forgotten how to do that. So some rest is in order, break is in order. Some fresh ideas from Marty would be really helpful, particularly with respect to the special teams. Some discipline. The Canadiens' discipline is awful. It's not the worst, again, by any means, but any bad team, any team when they're playing and it's the inferior team, that the officials are going to call more against that particular team. So the Canadiens, knowing this, that night in and night out, they're probably playing against teams that are better than them. They really need to be disciplined, and they're not doing that. I would not in any respect call them lazy in any way. The effort is there. They just seem to be more scrambling, more behind the play, all of that. They're kind of forgetting when things were going right. Each player also knew their role correctly. And now they're trying to do things again that aren't suited to their own roles. Like, they're not fitting in the way that they were previously. So to me, it's a lot of just like a mental reset, emotional reset, some practices, some fresh ideas for Marty. And also, the Canadiens are now sellers. And so with every trade, it's going to be more and more of a wake-up call that, this team was almost in the mix and now they're back to being sellers at the deadline. So
you mentioned they will likely be sellers at the deadline. Who do you think they make available, and what are they looking for in return?
So earlier today, on the day that we're recording this, Pierre LeBrun talked about how the Montreal Canadiens and Jake Evans are not close on a contract. And then it seemed from the Canadiens media and the quotes that were coming out that the way he was talking about, it's been an honor to be a Montreal Canadian. It seems like, the writing's kind of on the wall on that. I will say he is currently their biggest trade piece because Jake Evans has had a stellar year, a fantastic year. He has sometimes, on some nights, been the only bright spot other than Lane Hudson. And these are two very different caliber players, right? Like, Lane Hudson has superstar potential. Jake Evans is always going to be bottom six. So, he's had a phenomenal year. And he's the kind of guy that you win playoff, you win championships with. He's like, when Washington added Lars Eller, for example, like he's that quintessential guy. So I think he's going to be the biggest trade piece for the Montreal Canadiens, but I wouldn't sleep on Yoel Armia, who also, has had a couple years. He put together a couple of years back to back that were really good. Who would be available is also David Savard for sure. I don't think he ever wants to leave Montreal. I think, and then Christian Dvorak, which I don't necessarily know anyone's going to call about Christian Dvorak. Like, I don't see it, but I see a team calling about David Savard because he's that shot blocking guy. Again, he's like that cliche guy that you win in the playoffs with. Like, he's going to throw his body on the line to block whatever puck. He's going to save that like one Stanley Cup winning goal or whatever. So those are really the big three for me. And I do think that the Montreal Canadiens do have an opportunity as well to look at acquiring some more prospects. I don't think anymore they're looking for picks. I think they're looking for prospects at this point. And then in the summer, they're going to look for immediate help, like roster players, whether it's on, draft weekend. They're not going to get together. It's decentralized now, but that's usually when deals happen, right? So whether it's draft weekend or whether it is free agency or whether it is, through a trade, they're going to acquire immediate help. Like, next year's the year that Ivan Demidov is set to come to Montreal. And next year they have to make the playoffs. Otherwise they're stuck in a perpetual rebuild scenario, just like Buffalo. And you want to avoid Buffalo, is what you want to do. So I think, anyone, if you're a GM, you have to be calling Kent Hughes right now, whatever it is you're looking for, because there are deals to be made. And if you're a GM of a team that's poised to make the playoffs, like Jake Evans is a prize. And the thing that the advantage the Canadiens have is that there's a lot of teams that are still in the mix that the Montreal Canadiens have fallen out of, right? So I don't see the Islanders selling. I don't see, Columbus selling. I don't see Ottawa or Detroit selling. I see them trying to make the playoffs, and the Rangers are not going to be selling, whether it's because they are too good and they're just slumping, like in terms of a roster, or they're just too, like, their ego, right? So I don't, so I see that the Montreal Canadiens are the store right now. They're the shop, open for business. So, I think Kent Hughes is going to be busy for the next few weeks.
It's going to be an interesting ride for sure. Laura, why don't you tell us where you could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So we are we are Locked On Canadiens everywhere. We're no longer posting on X. We are no longer, so myself and my co-host, you can't find us there, or we're not tweeting. You'll find us on Blue Sky. You'll find us on TikTok. You'll find us on Instagram. You'll find us on Gmail, and all of those places I just listed, it's Locked On Canadiens. And you'll find us if you want to listen to us on YouTube and wherever you want to listen, wherever you listen to your podcast. So Locked On Canadiens, it is.
All right, Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you could place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.